Welcome to Third Floor Views, a production of Chesapeake Life magazine, where we talk about health, education, and living with kids. I'm your host, Janet Jefferson. Here with us today is Paul L.A. to the third. He is a community activist, co-chair of the Social Action Committee for Racial Justice in Chestertown, and co-founder of Students Talking About Race. Thank you for being here today, Paul.
Thank you so much, Janet, for having me.
Today, we've got a lot to talk about. We are discussing talking to kids about fighting systemic racism and injustice. To our viewers, please feel free to put any questions or comments you have in the comment box, and we will get to as many as we can. Let's get started. So, as I said, Paul, it's been a busy week, and I know you've been all over the place. Let's first talk just a little bit about your background and the work that you've been doing before current events struck us. So tell me just a little bit about your work for the Social Action Committee for Racial Justice in Chestertown, and what is the role of the Social Action Committee for Racial Justice in the community?
Okay, so Social Action for Racial Justice, it formed 3 years ago. A bunch of like-minded people, we all participated in a training called Undoing Racism. And that training it's given out by the People's Institute for Surviving and Beyond. They're out of New Orleans. So we come out of that training and there's a lot of emotions from every side, like what's next? Everybody was revving to do something and we didn't know what quite to do. But, you had a lot of email threads going on, a lot of conversations over coffee going on. And I think the social action was born that way. Yeah, I'm the co-chair. My partner Arlene Lee, we chair it together, and that's a little bit of the background on Social Action for Racial Justice.
And then, how have you functioned in the community? What is the work that you've been doing with the Social Action Committee?
Okay, so I think one of our biggest functions is giving people a safe space to talk about issues. Race is oftentimes not discussed and not talked about because it can be so uncomfortable. So, when you come to a SARS meeting, that's what we call it for short. You come to a SARS meeting, it's a safe space. It's a space that you can talk freely. It's a space that we can brainstorm around the issues. We have subcommittees. So to date, I'll stay current. Achieving Justice Together is one of the subcommittees. And that's co-chaired. We're lucky enough to have the state's attorney, Brian DeGregory, co-chair that with Arlene Lee. And that puts people in a room with law enforcement in our community. We can talk about issues. Students Talking About Race, they partnered up with March for Our Lives. And we actually held a sister march here in Chestertown. We've sat down with politicians and had tough conversations, trying to get them to commit to doing some undoing racism training. So we've done a lot. In a little bit of time.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot in a short period of time. Tell me just a little bit about some of the successes that you've had, which you've already mentioned a few of them with March for Our Lives and all the different committees. It sounds like there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of people involved, which is fantastic. So what do you feel like you're really proud of with this committee? And then what are some of the challenges that you may have encountered so far?
All right. Well, I'm really proud that we're 3 years in and we're growing. I'm proud that we're 3 years in and we're still engaged. It's easy to come out of a training like Undoing Racism and have a lot of emotions, but then life gets in the way, right? Work gets in the way, kids get in the way, sports get in the way, just life gets in the way. But we've stuck together and and we're still at it and we're getting stronger, I feel like. So I'm really proud of that. Some challenges. I guess like right now we're going through a challenge of trying to keep people engaged because of COVID, right? So you're not able to physically get to our meeting space at Sumner Hall. So we've been going back and forth with the steering committee on what's the best approach to keep our people engaged, especially when we have members joining almost, it seems like, every day on our social media and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine that this is challenging time with COVID, especially when you want that interaction, that in-person interaction, especially with challenging topics, and then not having that space is really hard. And It looks like we're in it for the long haul in terms of COVID. So thinking about how can we accommodate and pivot and shift and incorporate everyone. On that note, I'd love to hear more about students talking about race. And your background, I know, is as a mentor and
Mhm,
as a football coach. So you
mhm,
have a tremendous amount of experience working with kids.
mhm.
I'd love to hear a little bit about the mission of students talking about race and how it began and how it's
Okay.
going.
So I'll do the mission first. So our mission is to inspire open dialogue, self-reflection around racism in our schools and our community by encouraging uncomfortable conversations. Uh, we form partnerships, we encourage activism, and we promote equity at every turn. That's what we're focused on. A couple years ago, um, we had an incident in our middle school, uh, and it kind of pitted some white kids against some black kids, or vice versa. And the principal actually reached out, and she wanted some help around trying to quell that issue. And so immediately, I think me and another friend, we say, we'll come up. I'll come up to the school. Went up the following week because that conversation with Dr. Sperry happened on a Friday. So went in that Monday, and me, Barbie, Dante Johnson, we went in and sat down at lunch. And I sat down at lunch with the kid who pretty much has started the issue. Right, it was a white kid. And so when I approached the table, I knew this generation is big on respect. So I didn't just come in as an adult and feel like because I'm an adult, I'm going to sit down and infringe on your lunch. So I walked up to his table and I introduced myself and asked him, would it be okay? Could we have lunch together? And he looking at me and finally said, yeah. So I said, only thing I need your friends, right? I'm pushing the envelope now. I need your friends to kind of like give us some space. I just want to sit down and talk with you.
Mhm.
The hope was kids that I coach football, the kids that know me in the community, some of the black kids would see me sitting down. And the kid that I was sitting with, he was enemy number one at that point in time, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But I was hoping that the kids who knew me through different experiences in the community would approach the table. Like,
Mm.
why are you having lunch with him? Like, what's going on? Kids are very inquisitive.
Right. Right.
And sure enough, sitting there for maybe 5 minutes having a conversation with the young man, they started popping over. They started wanting to know, Coach, why are you here? Mr. Paul, why are you here? And I kind of hand selected, kids and said,
Uh-huh.
well, since you came over and asked, sit down. Since you came over and asked, sit down. And you looked up probably 15, 20 minutes into it, we had maybe like 8 or 9 kids at the table. And so it was super organic. The plan was to foster dialogue,
Mhm.
but that lunch period wasn't going to be enough time to really try to get to the issue.
Right.
So we got contact information, emails. Of course, we had to touch bases with parents to let them know what was going on.
Mhm.
And that's how Star formed. The principal was gracious enough to give us space at the middle school. We started holding meetings with that group of kids, and we were able to we avoided a situation,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
I think that was her biggest fear reaching out. She didn't want a bigger, she didn't want to fight. She didn't want, uh, you know, the school day to be disrupted.
Mhm.
But it
Mhm.
was a touchy subject, so that's how Star formed. Me and Barbie Glenn.
That's an incredible story. So are those same kids still involved?
We've lost a few and we've gained a few.
Uh-huh.
Um, so the core group is still the same core group, though. Yes, ma'am.
And how often do you guys meet?
Before COVID, we was getting together once a month, sometimes twice a month. It kind of, me and Barbie are big on letting the kids dictate it, right? We're
Yeah,
kind of
student
like,
driven, absolutely.
right. She's on one side of the plane serving as a wing. I'm on the other side serving as a wing. And
Uh-huh.
we're just kind of making sure we stay on course. But so, sometimes they're like, no, we're busy. Got this going on, sports getting away, clubs getting away, social life, work gets in the way. A lot of them are working.
Mhm.
And okay. And then sometimes they haven't heard from us in a while. They reach out and they want to do da 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 da. We got this idea. Let's do
Mhm.
this. And so that makes us have to sit down at the table and have more meetings. COVID, we've conducting Zoom meetings. We're checking in via text messages. We have a group thread that's, I probably need to delete. It's so old. Um, so we're staying in touch for
Yeah.
sure.
That's great. Um, let's get into the meat of it. How do you talk to your students about racism and injustice? So if you could just tell us a little bit about the tools and techniques that you use? So one of what I'm hearing already is relationship building sounds like a huge part of it. And the other part being student driven. What are some other tools and techniques that you're using with your students?
All right, so one that jumps off the top, I would say the three R's: relate, remain, and respect. Right, everything that I do with young people is focused on those three R's. Again, I said it before, I'll say it one more time. This generation, probably like no other generation, they want respect. You have to meet these kids where they are. So it's never pushing my initiative or pushing my agenda. I want to know what you all want to do. How do y'all want to do it? Then, let's make this work. That might not work, but sometimes we'll still try it. And then I'll sit back. I told you it wasn't going to work. Now let's try it this way, right? And it's super authentic. It's super authentic. Like, they trust me, like I said. But everything starts with those three R's: relate, remain, and respect. After that, you have to get comfortable. What we're over and over and over again. I'm telling them this, and I've heard them say it to other people, and it makes me feel good, because adults can really follow this motto. Have to get comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. It's okay to squirm in your chair. It's okay not to have the answers. It's okay to leave the room after an hour or 2 hours of conversation back and forth across the table and not have a solution, right? I think as adults, we get caught up in, that's the problem. We got to have a solution. We got to fix this right now.
Right.
It doesn't work like that all the time, especially when you're dealing with something like race, right? When you're dealing with something like social justice, injustices. So, they're good, and they tell adults, you have to get comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. That's a big thing. Like, you can say what you feel, you can say what you want around an issue, and everybody in the room might disagree, right? But we're gonna vet through that issue. We're gonna talk about it, and it can be uncomfortable. An original tool that me and Barbie came up with is something that we call "I was told," right? And what you do with "I was told," you want to have two people of opposite races, right? You get them up to the front of the room. You sit them in chairs back to back. All right, and then it's not really no time limit on it, but we'll let it go until pretty much they say that's enough. And I think every time that we've done this, there's been some tears, there's been some emotion, and so the guys of it, or the premise of it is, so you'll have to say what you was told or what you learned growing up about the opposite race. Negative, though, like disparaging remarks that you might have heard in different circles, and the other person, they have to do the same, right? So after you go through that for a while, get them up, move the chairs out the way, let them face each other. Room needs to be really silent. They're looking at each other. You think about all the garbage that we get from outside groups or images on TV, and you're looking at a classmate or you're looking at somebody from the community, and none of that is true. Right. And that's, it takes trust, and it takes them being comfortable being uncomfortable. But that's a big one right there. I think we never knew that it was going to evoke so much emotion when we came up with that. But it's called "I Was Told," and we lean on that one a lot.
And then what
especially with tough crowds.
Yeah. What do you do after the students turn around and face each other? Is it just a moment for them to reflect, or space for them to take it wherever they want to?
Okay, so we want them to reflect, but also it normally leads to some conversation. It leads to, I might have been told that, or I might have heard that, but I've known you, I've been in the school with you, or I've seen you in the community, and you're not like that.
Right.
Your people aren't like that.
Right.
And so it just fosters more conversation. Like I said, it's normally some tears, it's normally some hugs. Even with adults, like we had a reporter in covering us one day, and I threw him on the spot with another adult. It was a white guy reporter and a black woman, and we got them to agree to do it. And they were both misty-eyed.
Yeah.
Because it takes you to a space, it's oftentimes it's conversations or jokes or stuff that you might keep in your circle, right? So I'm with a group of black guys, we're talking like this, or we saying X, Y, and Z, maybe about what we heard about white people. And the same thing with white people in their circles, they're having these conversations, but now you're back to back with the person of a different race. And you're saying some stuff that you heard, or some stuff that you maybe even was taught, or some stuff that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Being completely honest, you're being completely transparent, and it's hard to do, especially sitting down in that room back to back with the person who you're talking about. You're talking about their race.
Yeah, it sounds like a really powerful exercise.
It's intense. It's intense.
Um, what, especially because, we at Chesapeake Family Life, are with parents all the time. We're talking about parenting. We're really focusing on that aspect. I'm sure we have many, many parents that are with us right now, talking and listening to us today. What do you recommend parents do in sort of tools or techniques? And then specifically Black parents, and then also white parents. Are there recommendations that you have on how they approach the conversations about race and injustice?
All right. So, and we don't have to split them by Black parent or white parent because they're the same, right? You're raising kids. I mean, the message might be slightly different, but brutally honest, straightforward, right? So, my kid recently became a licensed driver in the state of Maryland, and in a white family, that's a time to celebrate. That's a time to be joyful. You're driving. You're legal. You can run some errands now. You can go pick up your little brother from practice. I don't have to do it anymore. And
Right.
of course, we were ready for all of that. But before we can have that celebration, we have to sit him down and have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We have this conversation that's not going to be had in the White House. We have to sit down and let him know you're going to be moving now and maneuvering throughout this world without us a lot more now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what that looks like is when the cop pulls you over, if you get pulled over by the police, and it's anything after dusk, right? You turn your interior lights on right away.
Mm-hmm.
You cut the car off, you roll the window down, you put your hands out of the window, both of them. When they approach the car and they give you directions, you repeat those directions back to him slowly, right? So you want me to reach and get my license? Officer, I'm reaching to get my license now, right? So brutally honest, he wasn't ready for that conversation. Right. He's kind of like in his own little bubble, but it's nothing that we can't afford to tiptoe around it. Right. Same thing with white parents. I had a mom, I mentor her son, and we're friends now. We're good friends now. Been mentoring him for the last 3 years, and she reached out around use of the N-word through hip hop songs. Right? She had a house full of white boys that she's raising, and she's like, Paul, they don't all get it. They're still questioning, And I directed her to a video on YouTube where he breaks it down brilliantly, and it's just like he said something like, I'll be super short. I don't want to be long-winded, but he was basically talking about, it's a Black guy, and he's talking about having a friend with a nice cabin, right? Mm-hmm. And his friend, the white guy, calls it the white trash cabin. And the Black guy's like, no, even though he says that, when he invites me to the cabin, I'm not telling him, yeah, I can't wait to get up to your white trash cabin. And there's other examples in that video that she sent. But like I told her, after the video, just have brutally honest conversations. They can handle it. Mm-hmm. Right? We often think kids can't handle it. They can handle it. Mm-hmm. They can handle it. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
What age? So you were telling the story originally about how STAR got started, and that was middle schoolers, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing a lot of research recently about when is the right time to talk about racial injustice with kids, and the answer is yesterday, right. 3 years ago, right. Before birth. Mm-hmm. How do you maneuver that conversation with different age groups that's sort of developmentally appropriate? Because right, you're saying brutally honest, and is that how you navigate that at all ages, or do you sort of scaffold this for kids differently depending on how old they are?
Okay, so my expertise is probably middle school and up. That's my pocket. That's what I work with, right? Mm-hmm. So we're talking like 7th grade all the way through. But I'm fortunate enough to have a 12-year-old in the house, and I'm fortunate enough to have a 9-year-old in my house, and still really, really honest, but more reserved. And I kind of let both my 12-year-old daughter and my 9-year-old son, I let them they let me know how much they can handle by the questions that they ask, by some of the conversations that I hear them having between each other around race, right? We might watch a movie, and like a couple years ago with Salma, we watched Salma as a family, and my daughter had so many questions. She couldn't get over the fact that it was girls similar to her age sitting in church and somebody bombed the church. Like that did something to her. So it just, with her questioning me, Daddy, why? What did they do? And that let me know that she was ready to have a conversation. So I feel like not with the kids that I work with, because again, they're middle school up through high school and some college, but I can speak on it to the fact that I'm raising I'm raising some little ones,
Right.
and I just kind of let them dictate and push the envelope of the conversations that we have, and even the activities that we do. Took them to the African American Museum, and most of our group started downstairs when we got to the museum in DC, and that's where the start of slavery and
Yep.
bringing the slaves over. And so I had both of them, and they were a couple years young, and I just asked them, I said, listen, the slavery stuff is downstairs. A lot of the good stuff that we've done and accomplished as a people is upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
You two tell me, where are we going to start?
Mm-hmm.
My daughter looks at me and said, Daddy, we know we were slaves. We learned about that. How much more do we got to know? Can we go upstairs? I love it. Let's go upstairs.
Yeah.
And if we don't get to the bottom, if we don't have enough time, so what? Because like she said, she already knows that narrative about herself and her people.
Right. So it sounds like really student driven. Let the kids lead.
Mm-hmm.
Though you are absolutely providing all of these opportunities for them. So taking them to the African American History and Culture Museum, having them watch Selma together as a family. So you're just sort of throwing the opportunities out there, but then letting the kids dictate what they can handle.
Totally.
Yeah.
And like the baby boy 9, he might not want to have a conversation about it, and that's fine. But I know seeds were planted, right? And I know if we ever got to revert back to it, or if you're not with me, you see something on TV, you see something on one of your devices, then you got those seeds that were planted, and we can always revisit it.
Right. Definitely. How do you talk to your students about violence towards the Black community and the lack of judicial consequence?
All right, so we've had some conversations this week in a group chat with a group of young men. It's all young men in this group chat, and their ages range from probably 11th grader in high school to college seniors. And we're in this group chat, and they're angry. And so what I try to do is I actively listen to them, and then I try to steer it to where we can do something positive. It also gives me a chance to soapbox. I'm a real big advocate for local politics and local politics mattering, right? And so especially with that impressionable age where they're a few of them are voting, but most of them, they aren't old enough to vote. I let them know that's why you have to pay attention to your local politics. Not more than nationally, but equally, because I think oftentimes national politics trumps local politics. And I feel like I don't want to get in trouble for saying it, but I almost feel like local is more important, right? Because this is where I live. So
absolutely,
we talk about just protecting themselves. We talk about being aware and conscious of your skin color as a Black person, and it's things and situations that you have to be mindful of that your white counterparts, even your age, they might not have to be aware of. Right. So it's a constant evolve. It's a fluid conversation that we have.
So with that, how do you balance empowering your students, but then also ensuring their safety?
Okay, that's a great question. So we had a person, a young woman in Star speak out this past year, and she received a lot of unwanted and negative attention because she was so brave and speaking out. So the conversation that me and Barbie had with the other Star students and other people who the kids had deemed as allies were, we have to cocoon her now. We have to protect her, right? She's not if you have a class on the same hall, walk with her to her class. Get her to her class first. We start paying attention to her social media, ask her kind of to lower her voice, not to be fearful, but you've got this started, and you were the face for it getting started. Now let other people who agree with you and taking a similar stance as you, let them amplify their voices, right? And it's not to silence you, it's to protect you. And that doesn't always go over well with a headstrong young person, because no, I want to, you can't on this one. Let somebody else speak out. So, that's the biggest thing. We just try to get them cocooned as best we can so they're not taking the hits by themselves. And then also making sure Barbie's, she's a mental health therapist, right? So she's always constantly going to them with coping skills. And they know that line of communication, no matter what time it is. You need to call and cry. You need to call and vent. Like, it'll be times throughout the day they're texting or calling because something has happened. And another safety mechanism that people don't often think about, documentation. You don't think about teaching kids to document, right? But we're constantly letting them know you have to document it, because sometimes in these situations, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. Because sometimes people don't always want to deal with it, because we go back to what we said in the beginning, race can be very uncomfortable. So
So by document, you
documentation.
mean like using your phone to record and making sure that there is a sort of proof that it happened.
And even if you can't get to your phone, right, jot some notes down.
Okay.
Right, the trigger. It doesn't have to be a paragraph or an essay, but jot down what was said. Jot down what happened. How did it make you feel? Was there anybody else in the room? Jot their names down as well. So when we come back to the table with it,
right,
because we might not be able to get to the table that day. Schedules and stuff happen. If we don't get together until 3 days later, you can pull it right up. Such and such was in the room. This person was in the room. This is what was said. This is how it made me feel. And we're able to take the appropriate actions from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. With that, sort of to pivot a little bit, let's talk a little bit about law enforcement and the police. How do you talk to your students about police? And within your sort of larger umbrella of the Social Justice Committee, do you work with law enforcement at all?
All right, see, so we get to go back to Achieving Justice Together, that subcommittee that was formed. Again, Brian DeGregory, State's Attorney, co-chairs with Arlene Lee. We have law enforcement in the room. We have law enforcement. They've been at every meeting. Chestertown Police, and then also our sheriffs, our Kent County sheriffs have been in the room. And we had some conversation there that were pretty tough, because it's people in my community who don't trust the police, and it's people in my community who have just rights not to trust the police. And so now you have the police in the room. What I talk about, then I'll try to pivot back. What I talk about with my kids that I work with directly is, there are way more good officers than bad officers, right? But because there are bad officers, we have to train you and teach you how to deal with them in case you run across one. It's not to have you in a situation of looking at every single police officer as bad, because that's not true.
Right.
But until we can figure out a way as a society and as a country to weave out those bad ones, where we get, we can get away from this narrative. If we're ever able to change this narrative, I feel like we have to do our just due as mentors and as community activists to prepare not just our kids, but everybody what to do in case you come across bad ones. But definitely having them in the room with the young people, having a meal. That's how the meetings start. Every meeting start with the meal. We're breaking bread together. And you can't sit over here with me because you're comfortable. You got to go sit over there. We got to mix this up. And they're able to hear conversations. Right, so an officer is able to say, what are you doing in school? Like, what clubs are you in? What sports are you in? And what it does, and over a meal, it makes them human. I want the cop to look at this young African-American kid as human. I want this kid to look at this cop as human. Because once we can get to a place of you're human, I'm human, we can start to make some changes.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like the work that you've been doing with the Social Justice Committee has put Chestertown sort of in a better place to handle what's been happening this past week in terms of protests and the relationship between the Black community and law enforcement?
I can't speak for the law enforcement part. To handle, yes, because we have a mixed group that I feel like is somewhat trusted by the community, right? So I feel like we can handle, we're prepared to have conversations. We have people in place to have conversations, to do Zooms or teleconferencing. We met this week in the park. One of our ministers had 5 or 6 ministers come from, and just invited anybody that wanted to come have prayer in the park. It's a prayer walk tonight, a silent prayer walk. It's a rally scheduled for tomorrow. The NAACP is doing something on Sunday, I believe. We had a nice turnout last Sunday in Wilmer Park. So we haven't had any violence. We're having conversations. I see some heated debates on social media. So I won't toot our horn and say like we're the epicenter of ready to handle it, because of course we're not. It's always more work to be done, but I think we have a good foundation. I feel like we're above, we're ahead of some other places. I'll say that. Yes.
I'm looking at the time and I don't want to keep you forever. I do want to pivot just a little bit because this is tied together. I know that you've been doing a lot of work with COVID-19 relief. Can you just speak briefly about that and what you've been doing, how it's been going, and how you've been helping the community deal with COVID-19?
All right, so we're paying attention to it. Once we realized that COVID was serious and that schools were going to get shut down, I called my co-chair and I said, we got to figure out how to feed people, because we're about to go on a lockdown, or whatever you want to call it. And we put an email thread out. We identified other leaders in the community. We didn't keep it in house. We said this is going to be an initiative. We're going to need help. And one of the first people that we reached out to was Myra Butler, our Kent County Parks and Rec director. And once she gave us the space, the community did the rest, as far as volunteering and as far as donations. And even people outside of this community have given a lot monetary wise. But we were able to galvanize the community. Last I checked, we were sending out 400 senior citizens bags, 200 on Tuesday, 200 on Thursday, with perishables and non-perishables. So you're getting cheese, egg, you're getting tilapia. We were able to get Cisco, and they donated 15 tons of food.
That's fantastic.
And that was through Ms. Carol Schoonover. She set that up with Don Sella Wilson through the Lions Club. They was able to make that happen to get us 15 tons of food, gallons of milk. So for 13 weeks, we've been doing a big part to feed our community. Besides the senior bags, we were also partnered up with Kent County. They were doing lunch and dinner, and we sent out breakfast bags. I think at the height of it, we had maybe like 15 sites.
Wow.
So we it was no excuse not to get some food if you wanted food in Kent County.
That's great. That's fantastic.
So that's mine.
So taking all of this into account, it's been it sounds like a really busy few months, 13 weeks. And now we're headed into summer. COVID's still here. We are protesting. What are the next steps? How can we prepare for this summer? What can we as parents and family and community members do next? And sort of what's your take on this?
All right, so my take on it, one is we got to continue to be smart, regardless to how the state is opening back up, regardless to what phase we're in. I feel like we got to use good common sense. I feel like we got to continue to socially distance, continue to wear a mask, continue to stay home if you're not feeling well. That's the first thing, right? And that's what I'm trying to, let everybody know in my circles. Let's continue to monitor this thing, because we don't know what it's going to look like in August. We don't know what this fall is going to look like. On the social action front, because people are chomping at the bits to get active and stay engaged. I know we're working on a few things. We have 100 days of action that we're working on, and we're going to be coming up with some things. I know that we have a new group, the Black Men's Community Council. We had some things working in the works. Like, I think our first rollout initiative is going to be Arrive Alive, and we talked a little bit about that. But that's going to be teaching young people how to interact with the police if they are pulled over, or not even pulled over. Any form of police contact. How to keep you safe, and the title explains it all. Your job is to arrive alive. Right. So that's coming. So it's a lot of stuff in the works through social action and then the Black Men's Community Council. It's a lot of stuff behind the scenes going on right now, but we're planning on keeping busy and keeping safe. Like, I was in DC yesterday. I protested for a little while, and it was just an amazing amount of love had people walking around with hand sanitizer, like the spray nozzles that you might use in your garden. Like guys that can and women they had contracted stuff, and they were just I got sanitizing there, spraying your hands down. So it was definitely got to be smart. But I know also we got to stay active and we got to stay busy. We got to stay vigilant.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for being here with us today. I know you're super busy, so thank you for taking time to talk to us and address many of our questions. Thank you to all of our viewers and listeners. Make sure you visit ChesapeakeFamily.com for up-to-date local information on home, health, and living for today's Maryland parent. This episode will be archived on ChesapeakeFamily.com in video and podcast form, so check it out and share it. I'm Janet Jefferson with Chesapeake Family Life and Third Floor Views. Thanks so much.